So. Okay, is that me?
That's you.
All right. Welcome everybody to the power of our story. Our fearless leader, Dave Weiner, is no longer here for at least tonight, so I've been tasked with taking over, kind of co-chair with Sarah, somewhat, a little bit. So it's my absolute honor to introduce Jason Sautel. I'm not sure, did you retire out of Oakland Fire, or are you still active?
Yeah, I was picking weeds around the firehouse and threw my back out, so they made me leave after.
Gotcha.
No, there's no real glorious story to it, but I took a fall in a fire, broke my back and my hips, got back on duty, and was throwing a ladder up to a window to snatch someone out. And when I went up, one of the pins let out again. Did another surgery, and then truly when I got back to the firehouse, we were doing maintenance around the firehouse and the pin popped. And like a lot of folks probably deal with, I had to do a lot of back and forth to try to stay on the job, and finally they told me I couldn't work anymore. So my total time in the fire service was from 1993 to 2015.
Wow. All right. Well, I understand you're also an author, a book called The Rescuer.
Yeah, I wrote a book, something I never thought I would do because I also dropped out of high school in the 10th grade. I don't know the difference between a verb or a noun, but I guess I can tell a story. And Thomas Nelson, who's one of the big 5 publishers, picked up my book and published it. And actually, you're going to do a couple more. So it's been kind of a crazy, weird ride, but it's been a blessing on all levels because it's gotten me to be able to meet folks like you guys tonight.
Oh, it's amazing. Author also, and same thing. You and I've got a lot in common. I dropped out of high school in the 12th grade, and I could never write a police report, but I could write a book. I don't know what that's all about. But, so tell us a little bit about your podcast as well, if you would.
Yeah, you know what? So the majority of what I do is part of my story is faith-based, but I also hear that, I know that a lot of people aren't here to get the faith-based story out of me, but it's who I am. So I incorporate that pretty much into all I do. I started off my podcast and I just wasn't really stoked with it after the first 5 episodes. And I was getting kind of bothered with the cancel culture on all sides. Just so we're clear, I'm not talking right, left, conservative. It was just bugging me that everyone wanted to cancel everyone out. So I changed the name to Cancel This, kind of like in a derogatory, like cancel this. And what I do is I talk about topics of today. I talk about stories that I've heard that are just so amazing, and basically anything I want to talk about. But what I do is I put on my scriptural goggles and also use my 22 years in the fire service to kind of pull the stories apart in a way people maybe haven't seen before in the general public. And it's just been a lot of fun. And we're, like 12 episodes in, and we're pushing 80,000 listeners already. So it's been a really quite a ride. Yeah.
Wow, I love it. That's amazing. So I'm going to shut up, and I'm just going to invite everybody to ask questions if it's okay with you.
I would love to.
Sorry, hang on for 1 second here.
Did you want to share your story and then have question and answer after?
Would you like me to share my story? Whatever.
I was actually getting there, but I was a little slow. So
yeah, no problem. I'd be happy.
No, you're great, Chris. Sorry, that was my bad. So
how about I do the tiebreaker here? I'm going to tell my story, then we'll open it up for answers. How's that?
There you go.
Awesome.
Great. Well, first off, as I mentioned, my name is Jason Sautel. Started off my career in the fire service back in 1993 when I was 18 years old, and I was running amok in Southern California, surfing and doing things I shouldn't have done. And I first joined this thing called the California Conservation Corps, which is code name for either go to jail or go start picking up trash on the side of the freeway and cleaning up the parks. So I chose going to the California Conservation Corps. And when we're at the California Conservation Corps, we're at a fire camp in Southern California, and we were fighting fire, but we were feeding all the firefighters. And one just came up to me and started talking to me. And I was like, so what do you guys do? You squirt water on weeds? I mean, that doesn't sound really that much fun to me, And then he started breaking down the whole fire service, which obviously I had a general knowledge of what the fire department did. But it just sparked an interest in me that I wanted to do something more for not myself, but for people around me and just serve those around me. And so I went to a local, what was called CDF Fire, which is Cal Fire nowadays. And I knocked on the door and I did an interview, and they actually hired me, and I became a firefighter there. Speed up the story a little. The 1993 fire season in Southern California was insane. It was a Santa Ana event like they still get nowadays. Malibu was on fire, all parts of the southern part of the state was on fire. And I remember we were down there, and after about 3 or 4 days, we were finally catching a break. And my captain looks over me, he's all, old crusty guy. He's all, hey kid, you know what those LA City firemen are making? I'm like, what? He's like, they're making like 45,000 a year. I'm like, what? Dude, I'm making $4.25 an hour. I don't get paid after midnight. Forget this. I'm going to go be a city fireman. So what I ended up doing was I went through EMT school. I put myself through paramedic school, and then paramedic jobs paid more up in the northern part of the state. So I came up to Oakland and I would work as a paramedic. And then during fire season, I would work for CDF Fire. And on my days off, I would make the 8-hour drive up north to work the paramedic rig. So it was only a couple of years that. And while being in the city of Oakland, I always wanted to, like I was mentioning, be a firefighter. And I took the test, told all the right lies, and they ended up hiring me. And so got to join the Oakland Fire Department. But prior to joining the fire department, I had a pretty tough past as a child, like I'm sure many folks have. And I grew up in an abusive home with a dad who was a Vietnam vet, and my mom walked out on us when we were about 8 years old. So living under his, I say he was suffering from the demons of his past, because I don't want to make him look like a bad guy by any means. He was trying the best he could, but the best is not what a child needed. And so it was really tough. And when I became a firefighter in Oakland, I landed in West Oakland, just 3 doors down from where the Black Panther Party started. Very diverse city, awesome city, great. Like all you guys know, there's a little bad element that just loves to grab hold of the good element and take advantage of them. Well, as in a firehouse where we're going out the door on 300 shootings per year, multiple fires, the crack wars were alive big time then. And it just started to weigh me down. And the problem being was I had never really dealt with my past. And when I became a firefighter, it felt good helping other people. But as you guys know, from wherever you work in EMS, whether it's police, dispatch, or fire, every scene you go to, every call you answer, a piece of it attaches itself to you. And after a while, if you don't have a place to put those pieces down, they'll finally start weighing you down. Now, some of those pieces are boulders, others are just pebbles, but they do start filling up your bag and they're going to weigh you down. And that's what happened to me. Was I felt like I was living in a fishbowl. At the firehouse, everyone loved me, man. I was the biggest jokes around. My nickname was the Demon Seed because I actually cursed a pastor out of our firehouse one time. And that's in chapter 2 of my book. You can read about that. And that's where I was given that nickname. But I just finally got to a point where I didn't think I could carry on anymore. And I was ready to take my life. And it's a total trip because just a few seconds before I was to the point of no return, a really good friend of mine who's a San Francisco firefighter came over. He didn't even know what was happening. He's one of those guys that's like, we all have that friend where he's like, I'm coming over. Like, no, you're not. And he's already knocking at the door. And you're like, bro, really? You're here and stuff. He's one of those guys. So those guys and gals are needed. All right. And he just looked at me and he saw the emptiness in my eyes. And he was like, we're going for breakfast. I was like, all right, let's go for breakfast. And it was just that connection with him. Things started to turn around in my life. And all the bad things that were happening to me started pointing me to good. And for me, and again, I'm not here to preach, teach, or just push Christ crucified on you guys. But for me, I started noticing the faith side of things was where I was starting to find goodness. I was starting to find hope. I was starting to find answers, getting clarity for all the negative stuff that I was dealing with. And then a girl entered my life, and she was the first person I ever gave truth to. I didn't lie. Like I would never lie about stuff, but I never opened up. And she's the first person I ever opened up to. And she could just see how broken and hurt I was and the pain I was in. And she could feel something inside of her, said, I want this guy to go to church with me. Well, she did it in a pretty good way. 2 weeks into dating, I'd never really fallen in love before. And we were in love. And she looks at me and goes, yeah, I'm breaking up with you if you don't go to church with me. And everyone's like, whoa, what was the big story there? I'm like, well, she's hot. So I went to church with her. And you guys, I'm not trying to sound misogynistic, whatever those words are. See, I don't even know them. Sound like a total jerk of a guy chasing a hot chick. Okay. But she's been my wife of 19 years now and stuff. And for me, I found hope through my faith. And it was just, it felt so good. But I want to be so clear, even though I'm telling my story, I tell people all the time, find the healing and the help that works for you. Obviously, mine is going to be a faith-based approach. So people say, so how do you deal with people that don't have your faith? And I know what they're asking. They're asking right away, do you have a gay or lesbian friend? Heck yeah, tons of them. Okay. Do we sit there and talk about Jesus all day? We certainly don't. Okay. So I separate things by saying, this is my faith over here. Come talk to me about it. I would love to have great discussions with you about it. But then on this side over here, I want to be open for everyone who is struggling, who's in pain, who's going through the hard times, and be the paramedic that I've been, that many of you are, and point them to the hospital, point them to the true help they're going to get, because I can't help anyone. I can't save anyone. I can't give them the help they need, but I can definitely help point them to the help they need. And that's just what I kind of do in life. And writing my book, it just goes way more in depth, obviously, into my story and stuff like that. But I just want to give you guys a little background on my book, what I did. And the last thing I'm going to throw out there to you guys is, people read my book like, wow, you're an expert on PTSD. I'm like, I'm not an expert on anything. I didn't even realize truly that I was struggling with PTSD until I started getting invited to all these groups saying, how'd you deal with it? And so I asked my wife one day, I'm like, did I have PTSD? And here's how dumb I actually am. My wife's like, yeah, you almost killed yourself, you idiot. I'm like, yeah, Shell, you know those nightmares you have every night? I'm like, yeah. So where I kind of want to prop you guys up is, honestly, I didn't realize all the struggles I was having till I started hanging out with other folks from telling my story, and then you guys telling your stories back to me. So I just want to encourage you guys to keep doing that. And that's the background of who I am, why I wrote my book, and all that good stuff.
Cool. It's a good opener. Sarah helped me out here. I'm a rookie with these kinds of things, so I'm not sure where to go from here, but sounds great. I mean, it's sounds like a fascinating story, and I guarantee that we all got to have some kind of a connection here. So
I'm going to jump. Can I jump in? So as a book editor, I help people write their stories, and I've been doing that for many years. Through the process, it's a very difficult process to write your book, especially when you have things that you're dealing with in the, along the way. Mm-hmm. Did you find it any catharsis as you were going? Did you find points in the book where you were just like, okay, I can't do this? Yeah. Stuff that you didn't want to face?
Yeah. There's actually some things that I ended up leaving out. Not that I left out of my story, but there's a couple of things I personally didn't want to do for me. And I don't discourage anyone from doing stuff. I want you to do what's right for you. But I left out the firefighter deaths that I've dealt with. And I also left out the police deaths that I dealt with, because my best friend, who's a sergeant with Oakland PD, he was one of the 4 officers that were shot that day. We had the 4 officers killed by one man in our city. And so those were hard stories I left out. And the reason I left them out was because I didn't want the family to relive the traumas through my writing, because I didn't know all of them very closely. So that was one area that was kind of on my heart that I left aside. But I encourage people to write what's ever on their heart and do it in a way that they think is right. A few days before I was getting ready to write my book, I truly said, I can't do this. And I told my wife I was done. And as a praying wife, she started praying for me. And she said, just take a couple of days. Don't throw this computer in the pool like you've done the other. Because as a firefighter, I hate electronics, right? And so I said, okay, I'm not going to throw the computer out. And no joke, within 20 minutes, I get a message through Facebook, and I have a separate Facebook page that has over 700,000 followers or whatever's blown up to. And an FDNY fireman hits me up. He's like, you Jason Sautel, and are you friends with Brenda McDonough and da-da-da? I'm like, yeah, that's me, because he saw me on one of his shows or something. He's like, hey man, I just want to reach out to you, because tomorrow I'm going to leave my house and my family, and I'm not going to the firehouse. I'm going to kill myself. And I was like, whoa. And this literally happened 5 to 10 minutes after I told my wife I was going to write my book. So I make a phone call with him, and I just talk to him as a brother on brother and stuff. And cool thing about it is that was 3-4 years ago, and we're still friends, and we check in with each other all the time, and he's doing good. And that was the encouragement I had to write the book, because I didn't want to be honest. I don't read really other firefighter stories because I know what it's like to have the carpet melt you, to make a hallway, to push through the flames. You know, the general public likes that side of the story. But what I wanted to do was do something different, was write in a way that showed what we do and what we're feeling while we're doing it. You know, and that's where the bonding has come with the EMS community, not just nationwide, but worldwide, has come through that, because I wrote that way. So the long version is, yes, it was really hard to write. Now, as an editor, you'll also know this, going with one of the big five, I also had 10 editors and went through, you know, 10 different processes. Nothing got changed, but of course, arcs, things like that, you know, they helped me put into it. So those were, that was the hard writing part, but living it over again, each one of those scenes, they were as true as can be that I responded to.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, it is difficult. It's quite a process and changes.
Yeah.
Writing that hard stuff is very helpful, you know, to readers. We've seen it with Chris's book. We've had guys reach out and that have never talked about their service as, you know, police officers. So it's I always tell people when they come to me thinking about writing a book, I think we all have a story and we owe it to ourselves and to others to share it, to write it. I think that it's sort of an obligation.
Right. Yeah. And what I like to say is, and I love that style, is of the writing side, don't put pressure on yourself. If you don't think you're a writer, just start writing short stories after short stories, because the way I look at it is, you have this big hunk of roast meat, which is nasty by itself. But what you want to do now is start putting season, flavoring, all that stuff to it. It take a series of years, but just keep writing each little thing that comes up and you feel inspired to write, definitely write it. And eventually you start going back and reading that. And there's where your book starts being.
Yeah. Well, that's where the real writing comes through the editing, when you go back through it again and again and again. Then you start like putting the meat on the bones, you know?
Yeah, you nailed it. So good. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for doing what you do too. That's huge. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And do I call out people having questions, or do you handle that, Sarah?
I think Janet has her hand up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I'll take it down here.
It's all right. Hey, Janet.
I just wanted to say, one of the things that you said about everybody needs to, you know, we should be talking about our stories. In 2017, I did a talk in the United Nations, and it was to peers, but the most rewarding thing that came out of that is we never know who we're going to be touching. I got off that stage, and it was videoed, it's up on my YouTube. And it was the sound guy that said to me, "Thank you for the message." Because I talked about my journey, being married to a police officer and the struggles I had. Now, I've also done some writing about my own and put out a book in the end of June, the end of August. But it's just other stories, and it's rewarding. We need to tell our stories. And that's what's so great about this group. And we never know who it's going to touch. And if you hadn't had that page, right, that person wouldn't have reached out to you because they wouldn't have known you existed.
Right. And you know, what's so crazy about that is how that went about was in the fire community, knowing my faith-based side. My buddy, well, he wasn't my buddy at the time, but Brendan McDonough and I, we kind of connected, and with what he went through, where 19 of his firefighter buddies, you know, were killed and he's a lone survivor. And just by not saying, oh, big names are going to get it out there, just him and I are two nobodies that put the stories out there and how it's been used. And you're right, you don't know who it's going to hit, because I get over 200 emails and messages a day, and it just blesses me so much to read each and every one of them, because everyone gets something different out of it, right? Like, I wrote my book expecting firefighters were going to hate it. I mean, seriously, I thought my biggest fear was the backlash I was going to get from the fire community by promoting myself. And it didn't happen. But then you look over in the non-firefighting community, now everyone's starting to go, I didn't realize this is what the guys and gals in EMS as a whole went through, you know? And so then I can start talking in to the police, to paramedics, and, you know, to our military community. God bless you all and stuff. It's huge. I try not to speak into that as much because it's not an area I've walked in, but it's amazing how when you talk in the areas you've walked into, how it just draws in so many more people. And we can use those eyes now and put attention on the needs of the communities we've been called to serve, meaning the communities within our community of EMS that we've been called to serve, of making sure our brothers and sisters are okay. And it's just been huge.
Well, it's awareness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody doesn't speak up to something, it's like anything else. You don't speak up, people all think themselves, oh, well, I'm not worth it, or I'm the only one, and that,
Mm-hmm.
and it's when people that aren't so much the big names in that starts speaking out,
Right.
then there's a bigger response. Like I can speak as a spouse.
Mm-hmm.
Before I joined the force, like
Mm-hmm.
been through that as well. So we do have bigger audiences, but it's awareness, and these books and these stories help bring that out.
No, I agree.
Thank you.
No, thank you so much.
Brenda? Brenda, did you want to say something?
Yeah, sorry. I was on a different screen. I had to find my unmute button. So as a girl that goes to church, I wanted to say, that has always been my fallback, and I have a story, but I don't like writing. I don't like journaling because I don't want someone to be able to read like what my brain is thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And so I talk. And I talk so much like I'm a church greeter.
And
so I have that face that like, and I know I don't have the right picture up to see my face, but
right.
I have that face that like when I meet people, they just tell me their entire life story, whether I want to hear it or not.
Right.
And I think that, like for me, my person that I love talking with is my pastor at church. Mm-hmm. And I know when I had my own struggles, because I've lost several friends through suicide, I went through my own struggle, my own deep darkness where I had ideations at one time. And as a nurse, I'm so used to taking care of everyone that even though I know I'm supposed to take care of myself, I didn't see it when it was happening to me.
Exactly.
And I think that's where we need to learn to help each other, that,
right.
we're helpers, but I didn't see it happening to me. And what happened is the people around me that were closest to me that should have been able to be there for me, not only didn't know how, the stigma that was involved with it,
right.
It was easier to turn their back.
I hear you.
I think, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and also from the church side of things, a person with your personality that you've been blessed with, you love pouring grace out onto other people, but there's probably, you don't give much time for other people to give you that grace in return, would be my guess too.
Right. And, and I'm like, I used to joke years ago, like I have enough baggage to fill a cruise ship. I have a 34-year career. There's a whole bunch of stuff, right. There's a whole bunch of stuff. If I'm picking up a piece from everywhere I go along the way, there's a lot, but I know that, for me, like I said, as a girl that spirituality and I go to church and all of that, I think the biggest thing that I always fall back on is in church, you talk about your gifts and what you're gifted to do and what you're good at doing. And that's where, like, there's times where I get frustrated that I don't want to do this anymore. I don't, I'm done. I'm tired, and enough is enough. I put in enough years that I remember, and then I get reminded, whether it's someone actually telling me or it's that subliminal message that's saying, there's a reason why you're good at what you do. There's a reason why, this happened. And when you're past that certain point where you can flip it around that way and say, like I do now, okay, I lost my friend. I don't want anyone to go through that. I don't want anyone to go through where when I was reaching out for help, I was told, don't tell anyone because no one's ever going to want to work with you, or, all the negative stigma that comes with it. And I think that's where I really feel like years ago, they didn't teach us about this. I didn't even know I had PTSD. And I've learned through the years how to manage my triggers and how to stay away. But I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and I have very deep conversations with this person, and they were joking, and they said something that triggered me off like you would not believe. And even that person was so surprised because they were, and I'm like, I told you.
Yeah. Well, they're probably a safe person for you to also be triggered with, too, would be my guess.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
But so I think that's where we, you know, like, and that person has been through stuff. So that person, you know, we had to walk through it. But that's where we learn with that gift. At least that's how I rationalize it in my head, that, you know, in doing and having gone through everything I've gone through, it's helping the next person. And because I was stigmatized so horrible, that's where I want to make sure that it's not done to someone else. So even if it's done and I help one person, I've done what I'm supposed to.
Totally. No, I appreciate that on so many levels. Thank you for sharing that. And you've got my prayers and support coming your way. That's for sure.
Thank you.
And then Michelle.
Hi. So thank you for your story. I think that's pretty awesome. I actually went on Amazon and ordered your book, and
thanks.
super excited to read it. But I thought it was interesting how you were talking about you didn't really realize that you had PTSD until you started going into the groups, and then you're like, well, hold on a second.
And I was showing up as a speaker too, which is even crazier, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy to me how we all come about figuring that out, because I remember prior to the incident in November of 2020, I suffered with the undiagnosed PTSD. So I was going through college and for my bachelor's in psychology, and I started doing the studies on mental illness and everything like that. And next thing you know, we're doing a whole section on PTSD, and I'm reading and I'm like, oh, I do that. Oh, I do that too. Wait a minute. And I started learning, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I actually have all these symptoms. And then when my the incident or whatever happened in November, it kind of was like I still didn't see it until a couple months later, and then realized like, wow, okay. So I go to the doctor, I start the workers' comp process, and I'll tell you, even with all the studies and living with it for so long and going through everything that I was going through, I literally had a breakdown in my car the day that I was looking at the paperwork where it labeled me as having PTSD, because it's so taboo in our culture and everything. But I sat there crying for about 20 minutes, like, here's this. So it's crazy to me how we're actually very blind to our own symptoms, our own struggles, and everything that we go through.
I think it's both internally that we want to project perfection all the time, or not even perfection, change it up as just being normal, right? Because no one wants to be thought of as a normal. But then there's also a side, like in the Oakland Fire Department, you know, we always jokingly say in Northern or in California as a whole, we're about 30 years behind everyone else. So I always look at what everyone else is doing, then we're going to be doing that 30 years. Like we just finally put on turnout pants in 2010, you know, we're still fighting fire in wool pants and stuff. And also during that time, did we have a PTSD program, Fire Up? Yeah, but no one, even I would shoot it, and we'd all shoot it down because we'd also been conditioned in the fire service that you'd be a pansy, you'd be a wimp if you couldn't handle it. And I remember one time, and this, you know, I'm just going into my faith-based side, was after I became a Christian, I started hurting a different way for people. And I remember one time we're just at a house, and responding in impoverished areas, your entire career affects you. But I remember this one time, it just bothered me because I was just looking at these kids raised the way I was. You know, I didn't even buy my first bed or get to even have a bed until I bought it with my first fire department check. And I saw these little kids living like that. And it just crushed me. I'm like, gosh, it crushes me to see these kids living like this. And I remember the senior guy looks at me, and he, you know, 30 years on the job. He's like, well, if you can't handle this, then you shouldn't be working here. And I'm like, dude, I've already got 15 years on the job. Shut up. You know what I mean? But it just goes to show, and I'm not trying to be mean to the older generation, because it just absorbed into me. You know what I mean? And that was a reason I struggled with recognizing that I had the issues, why I had this pain, why, you know, even to this day, I have all these things in place where people, when you say you're fine, they're like, yeah, right, you're fine. I truly am fine. I'm healthy. I'm feeling good. But if you ask me about my sleep patterns, I haven't had sleep patterns ever since I was a kid. You know, I've only get 3 hours of sleep a night max, you know, and stuff. So certain things still affect me. And then people are like, well, how do you deal with them? I'm like, well, come 2 p.m. I take a nap, you know, and stuff is what works for me, to be honest with you, and stuff, if I can take a nap. So I hear you when you're talking about that it just creeps up on you. And then the recognition, then when you see you have it, you're like, I'm messed up, and no one wants to be messed up. And then the fear that we're going to have of being labeled that we're messed up, it's scary, and that's why I love, I don't fall into mantras of stop the stigma or stay home, stay safe. Sorry, that's all that political stuff. But I mean, the mantras that we love to chant, stop the stigma, this, that. I love things like this, where it's like, yo, tell your story and you're normal. Just let people know you're normal, and then let other normal people realize that they're normal, even though normal is struggling. It's normal to struggle. It's normal to have mental illness. I mean, my sister has mental illness, and she's been in a facility since I was 10 years old or something. I still hardly get to see her. Mental illness and all the struggles we go through are real. And then from the faith-based side, I always tell everyone, I'm like, we all have broken brains and we're all mentally ill. It just manifests in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I went through about half of my career was spent dispatching in California. So I was down in Kern County with
very busy area. Yeah, very busy area.
And then most of my time with California City Police Department. But yeah, the same thing, especially with the smaller departments. It's,
big city, small city, it's all the same.
Yeah. It's just, it was that sign that you're not normal according to the norm for law enforcement culture or first responder culture. And that is for me a big thing that I want to push back against. And I'm the first dispatcher to be out this long covered under workers' comp for my department. So for me, I'm like, no, I have to make a statement. This is okay. Workers' comp's acknowledge that I have a problem and they're taking responsibility for it. So this is the process to start breaking that.
Good. Yeah. And that's why the last thing I'll throw in there, I don't give two rips about insurance. I mean, they need to pay you is why I don't care about them. They need to pay you and take care of you. But one thing I keep thinking about through my career is how many guys died in flashovers, in fires, as opposed to how many friends I've had have taken their lives.
Right.
And it's so off kilter. And so what do we do in the drill tower? Well, of course, we're going to train how to not die while fighting fire. That's huge because we're out rescuing the citizens. Our job to lay down our lives so others can live. I totally get that. But I think we need to start with a foundation of recognition. And I truly am going to be speaking on it soon, that I think it needs to be part of the curriculum of a firefighter 1 certificate, that we also have to deal with this early on. So later on for the insurance companies, so I really don't care about, well, why do I get them on board? Is because it could help future claims and losses because we recognize it earlier and we start getting help and preventative things brought into to our guys and gals a lot earlier and stuff. So yeah, so thanks for sharing too. I know it's a lot to deal with on the workers' comp side too. So I'll be championing with you off to the side for that too. Yeah, no, it's not.
Cool. Todd?
Wow. We've got some parallel stuff going on, brother. I joined young. I was 17. My dad, my grandfather were both sheriff's deputies in King County, Washington. And that's what I was going to do until I saw Gage and DeSoto and decided that, firefighters got the chicks for one thing. And right out of high school, I moved into a fire station. I'd been a volunteer for about a year and lived in the busiest all volunteer fire station in the state of Washington. And one of the main reasons why I'm getting into the chaplaincy is because I want to weasel my way back into these agencies, because that's where the cultural change needs to happen. I think if we're fighting a fire, at some point our fire prevention efforts have failed, and I think that's where so many of us are right now. We're fighting the fires of our brothers and sisters killing themselves, and I think that while that's really critical, we need to do more fire prevention. And I remember 17 years old. I'd been in the department for a grand total of about a month and a half, and went out on a suicide. And this kid was maybe a year younger than I was, and that that messed me up something awful. I mean, like I said, I'd only been in the department for a short while, and my my captain's answer to that was, suck it up, because the next call's coming and I need you sharp.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what critical incident stress management was back then. I mean, this was 1983.
Mm-hmm.
And have you had the opportunity to be able to speak with agencies?
Oh yeah.
After your, how receptive have they been?
You know, what's kind of cool about it, how they've been receptive, is it's usually someone within the organization that reaches out to me. So there's already a level of reception there awaiting me, if you know what I mean. Now, what I think is more important is how do they receive it, is how do they start implementing programs themselves and moving forward. And to be honest with you, that's an area where I'm not a pro. I'm a champion at getting places like, hey, go to this place, go to that place, check out, you know, the International Association of Firefighters, because they have stuff on it. So what I do is I don't bring like any one program in. I use the esteem that a book gives me to have people contact me to bring recognition in that. And then what I do find is it's received very well, because they've asked me to come in and do it without me advertising to do it. And then I bring in true to life stories, you know, like with you, I talk about it. My book actually starts off where I recognized the emptiness inside of me was when I was on the Bay Bridge and between San Francisco and Oakland. I was like dealing with a jumper. And when he jumped off the Bay Bridge and we locked eyes as he was taking his eternal plunge down into the bay, I saw me and him and him and me, and we were just one. Even though I was, quote, the rescuer, he was the one needed to be rescued, but I needed the rescue too. So I can use that to say, listen, this is why we need it. And then the side that I don't like to talk about, but because I have dealt with budgets and city councils in Oakland, as you guys can, it's a tough place to be a firefighter. That's why I try to stay out of the administrative side, because it's so wacky and nutty there sometimes. But I always understand money talks. And with an administrative department, if you can hit them with money saving costs in the long run, that's where the bean counter's ears open up. And then you can do good for the boots on the ground.
Yeah. And I think coming in as a chaplain and as somebody who has had my experiences, again, about telling my story,
Mm-hmm.
You know, talking about spending a night with a gun in your mouth, it's not easy to do, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm the person that another firefighter is going to listen to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's called being in the foxhole. You've been in the foxhole with them. You know,
there are trust issues outside our community. When I was struggling again, it was just last year, and I work in IT
Mm-hmm.
for a agricultural co-op here in Iowa,
Mm-hmm.
and when my buddy gave me that buddy check, and he knew that my first answer was bullshit, and said, no, you're not okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just went to the EAP at my company, and it's such a crapshoot. And the good Lord smiled down on me and said, no, I'm going to do you right. You know, the guy that they hooked me up with was a retired West Des Moines cop. And so it was somebody that I was able to go in and have no problem opening up to and tell my story. And that's what I want to do, is be that guy that another firefighter or a cop can open up to.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, I'm not going to save that guy.
Right.
I'm not a clinician. I'm just somebody who knows the kind of shit that they've had to deal with and can maybe point them toward somebody who can.
Right. That's so
maybe
good.
that's what they need, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, do you find, like, when you're speaking about boots on the ground, when you're there delivering your story or whatever, do you find, I know that, like, when Chris goes and talks to, you know, police officers or
Mm-hmm.
police agencies, they put on this shell, they're just looking just stone face, stone wall, strong. because they're among their peers. Is it the same for firefighters? Do you
Oh
find-
yeah, totally. And that's where I come in. You know, that okay, now you get to see the firefighter, Jay Sautel, the demons. I come in firing shots right away. I'm like, all right, tough guy, take it. You know, I jokingly pick and love on them like we were around the firehouse table, because my favorite part of the firehouse in Oakland is the dinner table, because it was our department's policy that you have to eat dinner together. You would truly need to get a doctor's note and take it to the chief of the department to have a reason not to eat dinner with the guys and gals and stuff. And at the dinner table, I love it because we're different. I'm eating across from a Muslim, from an atheist, from a Christian, from one who doesn't care, from a Democrat or Republican, and we all fire shots back and forth, and it's fun and it's good. And then when the bell hits off, we walk out the door as stone cold lifesavers. And that's what I try to explain to people is, I'm not speaking into the cop side because I haven't been there, but obviously I've been on all the scenes too, but I haven't had to mitigate, figuring out who's doing what, right or wrong. I quote, get to show up as the good guy, right? Let's be honest. That's what we get to do. And what I tell people is when you show up anyway, you have to be that stone cold lifesaver, meaning you can't show the emotions of everything you're feeling, because your job is to give the highest level of care to a patient. And when you're doing that, you're stone cold doing it, meaning you're not bringing all your baggage with you, because all that baggage you're bringing with you isn't what that person who called 911 wants. Then when you get back to the firehouse, you have that. So when I walk into one of those meetings, yes, I'll meet all those stone cold lifesavers. And I used to be one of them. Like I tell everyone, fires burn as hot wherever you are in the United States. They just happened in Oakland a lot more because we're number one per capita in the United States for fire-related fatalities, all this stuff. We have, 500,000 people in a small little swath of land between the hills and the bay. And it's just, it's all of us Raiders fans living there. So we're all nuts. So a lot of bad stuff happens. So when someone would come in and try to teach me something, like, really, you're going to teach me something? But if they came in and acted, but not acted like us because they'd been there, it would open up my ears and stuff. So I think when you hit from that aspect of, you know what, I will never use this term, and it disgusts me when someone says, I know how you're feeling. Oh, really? You know how I'm feeling right now? Mm-hmm. I think the better way to approach it is, dude, I have walked in some pure crappy times and some horrible times in my life. And I'm here to kind of help you if you're going through that too, because no one wants to hear you understand what they're going through and stuff. You know what I mean? I don't like that. And I think when you bring that to the table with credibility, like what you've gone through of a shooting and stuff like that, and bring it to the table, ears now open up, and I think that's just the way it is, because you're having to deal with stone cold lifesavers, stigmas, all the other stuff. I mean, let's talk about it. Say like I get called right now and drugs and alcohol aren't an issue with me, but I go into a fire department and I'm going to speak into drugs and alcohol. Do you think someone who's struggling with drugs and alcohol is just going to raise their hand? No, because they're scared they're going to be losing their job, right? And so they, we've been trained to shut down on all levels of our job. And that's why peer support is so huge, because you get to walk in there as a peer. But when you walk in as a peer, make sure that they hear it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I think we have David and then Chris.
Awesome. So Jason, first of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story with such eloquence and such openness, and with your personality, that your story really shines through in a way that is truly, genuinely you and your story. And I love that. So thank you for sharing.
Oh man, thank you for those encouraging words, bro.
And I actually was just texting my wife a second ago. I said, this dude's voice is sexy as hell.
Well, tell your wife thank you. No, I'm just joking.
Not in a weird way, but awesome. So I have a note taker, as everybody here knows, and so I'm going to go backwards though today. And the last thing that you and Nat were just talking about, with the understanding and acceptance of being able to offer that help and that guidance. I'm a resiliency instructor, mm-hmm. and a master resiliency trainer here in New Jersey. And one of the things that we always coach people to do when they're listening, obviously active listening is so important, but just using the phrase "me too." and not the political hashtag version of it from.
I get you. No, I get you. Yeah.
But just a simple understanding when somebody's telling you something, because you're 100% correct. You could have had the exact same experiences at the exact same time, the exact same fire or shooting, whatever. And no, you don't know how I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
You have no idea. And just when somebody's saying something to you, you can just simply express that, just the simple 2 words of, yeah, me too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's so powerful and simple at the same time. And it's something we've always taught. And I love that.
Well, it becomes from going from empathy to sympathy, because empathy is, we're feeling for them. Sympathy is now we're actively doing something and stuff. So I totally get that, man. That's a great tool, man. Appreciate that.
Feel free to steal it. It's not mine. But the other thing that caught my attention when you were talking about the bridge incident, and there's some just weird words in this, what I'm going to say, but you looking at that individual and recognizing yourself in him and him in you, I thought was very thought-provoking for me. And the imagery of that was sad, disturbing, captivating, and so visual for me. And again, going back to the resiliency piece, one of the things we teach people is to catch yourself catching yourself. And that moment speaks to the definition of that. So I think that is an incredible turning point for you. And I think that piece of the story is so visually tangible for others to hear and listen to. And I think the more you talk about that moment, the more people you're going to touch, and the more people you're going to positively affect, so they can catch themselves catching themselves in the moment that you did.
Right. It's cool is that story is actually chapter 1 in my book too, is where it starts out. It's ask the question of that. And what's so cool about this, because as you guys know, I wrote this as my journey of faith, but I didn't write it as a Christian book. But like I keep saying, I'd be fake if I didn't do it. And what's so cool is so many Christians see it one way, so many non-Christians see it a way, but it's all the same thing. Is I need something good in me, because I don't feel any goodness in me. I have this black hole living inside of me, and everything that this world says is good, like a truck, a boat, a house, all this, dude, I threw all of that at the black hole inside of me, and it just ate it up, and that black hole got bigger, and I could never satisfy myself and stuff. So from the faith-based standpoint, I use that. But then hear me out. I tell that same story from the PTSD standpoint, saying your PTSD is going to take you down. And this is why it is so important for you to find the help that you deserve. Because I hate telling people the help you need. I turn it around and say the help you deserve,
100% agree with you. And those moments, like, so you're always just, and I tend to use a lot of like quotes and stuff like that to express my thoughts, but you're one thought away from changing your mind. And at any given moment in time. And that moment of you standing there on the bridge watching this guy fall and connecting eyes, like that's just such a powerful movie.
And it's true, because when you can tell when someone's just telling, like, it's like we go watch a fire department movie or a cop movie, you can tell they're fake. Like, I don't even watch TV and stuff. I once turned on this thing called Chicago Fire, and it was the most comical thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. So I just cut it off after that. So, yep. But when you tell it from a point of vulnerability, like, let's take it down. Just like you, I've been on 100,000 scenes that didn't really affect me. Why was it 30 or 40 significant scenes affect me? I can't answer that question, but what I can answer is they affected me. And so when I vulnerably write about those and how it affects me or speak about it, like you said, that's where it's now going to convict hearts and minds to look like, wow, that kind of hit me. And that's, again, why I'm here tonight. Not that I'm a big deal whatsoever, but when I was invited to this, the whole telling your story, I'm like, let's go. That's a spot for me.
And one of the other things I wanted to touch on was your faith-based perspective. And so many people that have so graciously told their stories to this group and others. And a lot of people have that faith-based perspective. And I love that. And Sarah hosts a whole section with Joe Landy in reference to faith-based, moving forward with that. And I envy those that have that ability and have that connection to their faith. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a whole day's worth of story in itself. So people here know parts of it, but my background is I'm Jewish, and
Mm-hmm.
I was raised in a Reformed Jewish household
Mm-hmm.
and community.
Mm-hmm.
And just recently, as this past week, there's been so many incidences where my Reformed Jewish faith has not only not supported law enforcement, but has been vile, vitriolic, and despising and spitting on the ground that law enforcement walks upon.
Well, I'm sorry, bro.
And it's tough to watch when you are in both of those worlds at the same time.
Right.
And I truly envy those that have that faith-based foundation that they can draw from and draw comfort from.
Well, check this out. Let me just share a story for you. And I don't want to give everything out of my book away because there's just story after stories that I threw in there. The day before I committed suicide, I walked into a church looking for the good that I thought those people had, and they turned me away. And that's one of the major reasons I was ready to kill myself the next day. Think about that.
That's what happened to me.
Yeah.
Same thing. My wife and I, we had a newborn and a 2.5-year-old, and we walked into a synagogue that was in our town that we were looking to join because they were having a new member breakfast or new member dinner on a Friday night before Sabbath services. And we were sitting down at a table and having some pizza, and this one, I'd say very crunchy lady sits down next to us, who happened to be the synagogue president. And she's like poking at what you do. And like, I knew where this was going, and it was going to be nowhere good. She didn't know where it was going, but I certainly did.
Mm-hmm.
I went from I work for the government to I work for a town to I was about to say I collect garbage. Like, it's because I knew where this was going. And she was such a jerk about it. I was like, I'm a police officer. And she goes, ugh, and got up and walked away.
Yeah. Well, you know what
it was insanity to me. And so that's why I truly envy those here and others that have that faith-based connection to their healing.
I hear you, dude.
It's got to be so special.
Well, here, the last thing I'm going to put in there, because I don't want to get all preached and everything, but what I do with that story, people ask me all the time about that story. And what I tell them now is I look at that story in my book and I hold it up as a mirror, and I ask myself, and I look at myself and says, Jason, are you doing anything that's going to turn someone away from your church? Are you doing anything that's going to turn for your faith? So people would tell me, well, are you still mad at them? I actually praise God for that situation now, because it was just another thing he gave me that I could grow from and learn from. And like I said, bro, I truly use it as a mirror, because I can't change those people. I can't change that lady that was treating you like garbage. I can't change any of the other folks. But what I can do is use those stories to change myself to help bless others. So I just want to throw that out there to you.
That's awesome. No, I really appreciate that. And last thing with the resiliency piece, you said you wanted to try to get into Firefighter 1, which I think is awesome. We're working on trying to get it as part of the police training programs here in New Jersey and beyond.
Totally.
So if you ever want to discuss that, talk about it, shoot me an email, and I'd be happy to pick each other's brains on it.
For sure, man. Yeah, definitely. I'll send my email. I'll give it out here when we're gone, and then I'll make sure she sends it to the whole group and everything.
Can I add something really quick for you, David? I had a similar thing happen to me when I moved back. I mentioned I lived up north, and I moved back to LA, and I went to a new church, and I, saw the priest there, and I said, hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. I'm back in town. I'm moving back. I want to volunteer. What do you have? So he knew a little of my history, because I told him the work I did in what areas. And he said, I have the perfect position for you. I want you to do this for me. Go fill out paperwork and blah, blah, blah. And so I did. Well, it turns out the person whose position he wanted me to do had been there years and was crusty as hell. And, and I was the new fresh face coming in, la, 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 and it turned into this horrible nightmare for me, where I was like, what? F this church. I'm not going to that church. And I was already struggling where, like, that's why I wanted to volunteer and give back to get out of myself. And you know what? When I look back at it, I'm glad, because it led me to the parish that I'm at now. And so I just want to say, just because that particular, I'm Catholic, but just because that particular synagogue wasn't for you, those people weren't for you, that doesn't mean there isn't somewhere else you could reach out to, or just even spirituality alone. You know, the church is made up of the people. If you don't like the people, you don't need the church. You know, you can still talk to God. So I just wanted to share that with you.
There's people of faith, and then there's religious people. You know?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I completely agree. And we talk about that in the resilience piece too. Spirituality doesn't mean religion.
I think probably every Christian has been hurt in a church, you know, because there is a bunch of people, and I think it's always hard to hear though. Like when I was listening to your story, Jason, and you were kind of talking about the two bouncers in that situation. I'm just like, gosh, what are they thinking?
Right,
but
right.
I did have a question. So again, I'm like a half hour away from the end of the book. I've loved your story. I love how genuine you are, how open you are, how very vulnerable you are. And because you articulate your story so well, it's so great for others to be able to learn, you know, to be able to get clarity in our own stories. And so I am curious, you did talk, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. You sounded like you had to deal with the hole in your heart that you talk about, and you kept busy. You were always wanting to keep busy. Even your house was immaculate. And then you would go and always, you know, wanted to be in the firehouse. And so I am not at the point yet where I'm reading what changed. You fell in love, and that's really cool. So I'm right at the beginning of that part. What changed, and what does your life feel like in the inside now?
You know, what changed for me was obviously there was a message that was told to me at church. And, you know, again, I don't want to make this church, you guys, for those of you that are not Christians and stuff, but it is part of my story. Was when Christy took me to that church, she introduced me to the pastor, and that pastor actually invited me out to a beer. And he was truly curious. Like, he hit me like, oh, wait, so you work for the fire department? Do you work at our local fire department? Well, in the Bay Area, Oakland Fire is known as the busy. We're the busy West Coast firefighting place. So people know we fight a lot of fire there. He's like, I always want to be a firefighter. And he started talking. It was weird because he was asking me about work-related stuff, other stuff. And we got to know each other, and we connected, and he just gave me, quote, the gospel message, if you will. And it became real to me. It just became real to me. And it truly became real to me the day that I was trapped inside of a fire and I almost didn't make it out. Now, I don't want to be a glory stealer from the guys and gals who've died in fires and have been severely injured. I wasn't as close to death as I thought I was, but being trapped inside of a fire for a few minutes when this thing called this RIT team, which I'm an anti-RIT team person because I thought it was the lamest thing in the world because it's changed. Well, they were the ones who came and rescued me and stuff. It just all started to make sense. And for me personally, the last theme I'm going to give from the Christian side is the Bible just gave me clarity. It just gave me the clarity I'd been looking for. And it just really helped me out. And then my faith and having a savior, it just changed me. And so moving forward, people say, so did your life get better today? I'm like, no, it still sucked. You know, I'm still on this same world as you. It's a big pain machine. This fallen world is a huge pain machine. But now I have understanding of why it is and that things aren't my fault anymore. And that is what has really helped me move forward. And even as a dad, you know, because we ended up adopting my niece and nephew from my sister's, from my sister, and had our own kids. And everyone's like, oh, you and Christy have the perfect marriage. Like, ask her, that's so far from perfect. It just looks good because I have a pretty background behind me right now and stuff. But what I do is whenever I'm struggling, it's just giving me a place where I can fall back into. And by having my faith there, I'm not falling back into the pit of hell. I'm falling into the arms of my Savior, and I can never go back into the pit of hell. And I have a place to rebuild up again and stuff. And that's what's fully changed in my life. And that's what's really helped me. But what I do continuously tell people is, someone will read, oh, it was a Christian book. Well, even at the end, it doesn't finish Christianity. Okay. It just talks about me finding that hope. And that's what I tell everyone is, I want you to find the hope. And then off to the side over here, we'll have those other discussions, which obviously I'm, love to have too. So that's where we move forward and stuff, is that I just have a grounding now. And then I have a community of people around me too, which is awesome. And what I tell people is, if this is your tribe and this is your local thing, go with it. Because I'm a huge believer. I can't change nationally. I can't even change things in the huge ultra area that I live in, which is in the Sacramento foothills, just below Lake Tahoe is where I live now. I can't change a lot of people, but the people who I can change are the ones that God sends me, which is my local community, my friends, my family, that, because I have everyday access to them. So what I do is I help as many people as possible, but I really concentrate on the small group around me, because those are the people I can actually make a difference in their lives. And that's why it's so important to have a good group of strong people that you feel comfortable with, that you feel wanted with, and you want to be around them too. Because I hate, let's be honest, I don't want to go hang out with people I don't want to hang out with. Okay. So I'm not going to open up everything to them. But if you find a sense of community like what you guys are doing here, it's where real change, real growth, and you can start feeling better, just like I have over the years.
Thank you, Jason. I'm with you. I mean, I think on all that, on the clarity and the hope and the small community, and that's what, we want to have here is really build closer, more intimate friendships. And so thank you again. And I see Christopher Hoyer's hand up.
Yeah, Chris, go for it. Hey, man, sorry.
So Nat and I are sharing computers across the room here, I had to have her mute really quick.
Gotcha.
I'm going to give you a little of my spirituality. I learned a lot of stuff after my buddy Dave was killed, things that I never would have even thought about. But there's only one particular story I want to share with you guys tonight, which is just unbelievable. And then I want to ask you a hopefully not too personal question about your bridge incident over there. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about that when David was talking about that, and I have a question / potential revelation that just kind of hit me out of nowhere. So I want to share that with you as well and get your feedback on that. So, 2016, my buddy Dave Glasser was killed, line of duty. It was an ambush, really ugly, and all kinds of things came out of that. My neighbor downstairs, former Marine, he's a Bible encyclopedia. The guy reads Bibles like nobody's business. The last time I heard, he read like 9. So the guy knows his stuff, to say the least. Long story short, he was up here not long after I moved in. I've got a poster up on my wall from Dave Grossman, and Dave writes the King David Psalm on there, 144-1, for most of you guys that know that. I've never really paid that close attention to it until my buddy Jason started talking about it. And so he says it much better than I can. He articulates it way better, but the version basically sounds something to the effect of, you understand what that whole King David Psalm thing means? I said, yeah, I've read it, and I have a pretty good understanding of it. And he said, well, you realize how long it took to make the heavens and the earth? And I said, yeah, 7 days. And he goes, okay, so you got 144-1, and then what was Dave Glasser's serial number? 8144. And the first time I heard that, I was bawling. I'm like, oh my God, because Dave was such a super spiritual guy. And I never really appreciated how spiritual he was until he was taken away from us. And then hearing those kinds of stories, I mean, I hear them all the time. Now that I've kind of opened my eyes a little bit more and started accepting these kinds of things, I'm like, oh my God, I've been missing out on so many things. And those kinds of stories are just unbelievably inspiring to me. So now I take it all on board. I love sharing. That's my favorite one of all. So
love it, man. Love it. Thanks for sharing that, bro. I really appreciate that, man.
So with that, if it's permissible, I'd like to ask you.
You can ask me. Come on, you're a cop. You can ask me. You know the rule. You can ask me anything. May I answer? I don't know. No, I'm just kidding.
I think you're muted there, Jason.
Oh,
all right.
Am I mute? Am I mute? Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Yeah. I think there might have been some that, Chris.
Oh, there we go. Okay. I had my volume turned down. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. Go ahead, Chris. Ask your question.
Okay. Yeah, we got a little communication issue going on over here between our two computers. So going back to that particular day, I know my tragedies. I mean, I'll share them all with you guys if you ever want to hear them all. I've had several, but I've never had the opportunity or been cursed, I guess, if you will, to have to be in a situation quite like what you've been through. So I'm going to fast forward to what I think my revelation is. I hope it's somewhat accurate. This is how I look at the guy right before he jumped. If he's looking in your eyes, it's my belief that I think that he wanted to share with himself the very last thing of goodness in his life, which was looking in your eyes, knowing that he was pretty much done. I don't know how far-fetched that is, but it just seems like, you know, if I'm up to that point, I want to share one last piece of goodness before I leave this earth. I think that was what you were there for. So,
oh man, I appreciate that, dude. Because yeah, you know, it's so hard to, you know, it's like you as a police officer, you always, what were they thinking? You know, we're always wondering what they're thinking. And so what I've learned is I love the interpretation other people have, because I truly don't know what that guy was thinking other than what I saw. And what I saw was a human being who'd just been kicked down their entire life, beaten their entire life, and just didn't have anywhere to turn. And I truly felt like as if evil pulled him, not like reached down, the physical manifestation happened, but it just had hold of him. And that same evil had hold of me. Not that I was being bad or doing things, but finally it's like evil won, and it yanked him off the bridge. And the look in his eyes were of sorrow, emptiness, and pain. So with your interpretation, I think that's an amazing interpretation. I really think it is, because I don't know what he was truly thinking other than what I got from my physical assessment of looking at him. Does that kind of make sense?
Absolutely. Totally does.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine pointed this out years ago. Says, you know, why is it that God lets all these really bad things happen in our life? And he pointed out, he goes, you know, sometimes Satan steps into and we can't stop it all. And I thought, wow, that's pretty huge as well. Because face it, I mean, Satan's got a hand in some of our stuff as well. We don't like it. We try to stop it as much as we can, but he's nipping away at us from time to time. You know, we just got to take that on board as much as we can, you know? So, yeah,
no, I appreciate that. And, you know, he's one of many, you know, just watching countless people take their final breaths as their eternities are being locked in has just given me a different view of life in general here and for eternity, you know?
Yeah. Well, thanks again, man, for sharing your story. It's amazing.
Oh, no, thank you guys for having me, man. I just hope I wasn't getting too deep or triggering anyone. That's my only fear.
Not at all for me. So.
Was so good. Thank you so much, Jason. Can I just say, would you say that another word for even the evil that comes in, like with that guy, that maybe it's just a whole spirit of hopelessness?
Yeah, because I mean, without hope, evil's going to run wild, right? Think about when you're in your worst time. If I come run in, there's hope. You don't want to hear that, so we got to bring it differently. But put yourself in your worst place. You're not feeling hope. What are you feeling? You're feeling the negativity drag you down. Negativity is evil. There's no way to look at it other than it's evil. So it pulls you. The hopelessness is you're in the darkness. The way I explain it is just living in the darkness, man. And I didn't want to be there anymore. I just got to a point that I didn't want to stay there. And after going on a series of calls and seeing that there was something so much better for me and stuff, meaning here and forever, it's what changed my mind, you know, and stuff. And that's what I just want anyone to think. If you're in that quote evil place, you're not an evil person, you're not horrible. But when you're in the darkness and the depression's there, the anxiety is there, because I'll tell you guys right now, more than PTSD, that's what I suffer from, is depression, anxiety. That's a real struggle with me and stuff. And when it sets in, it's a hopeless place. And when I'm in a hopeless place and I stay there, it becomes an evil, dark place, you know? And that's why I explain it to people. When you're in that dark place, don't stay there. It's okay. I don't want to put pressure on you either to just jump out like, oh, I'm okay, because that's as BS as me saying just stay there forever. But what I tell people is it's kind of like this. If I want to work on my cardio, I got to put a little effort into it. And I tell people, if you're in that dark place, put a wee bit of effort into it, even if that effort is just making a phone call, and that's it for the day. You know what I mean? And that's what I try to tell people.
One thing I like to say all the time is joy and sadness can't live in the same moment. So if you can find that small piece of positivity and try to be mindful of it, even if it's for a fleeting moment, that you can't combine joy and sadness, or joy and depression in the same moment. So if you can find a couple of moments of that throughout the day to help build upon as blocks, I think that's so important. And we all have our moments of sadness and depression and darkness. It's going to be there, but be mindful of it, appreciate it, and then find that purpose and that joy to be able to build back upon and spiral back up after you've spiraled down.
Yeah. And for a lot of people, it's going to take, as you know, it's going to take doctors, nurses, psychologists. There's so much to it sometimes. But then once you have that level where you're there, it's so cool to now have recognition, like you're saying, to not slide back into it, to now focus somewhere else. So I appreciate that so much, bro. Thanks for sharing that, man.
Can I add on top of that, as the nurse here?
Yes, ma'am.
We were trained from the very, very beginning. You never, ever, ever take away someone's hope, because sometimes that's all they have.
Yep. I agree. I love that. That's so good.
And once you, go ahead.
You can
once you start to see signs of hope, it's hard not to see them. My mom and I got into the business of writing love notes for first responders and veterans just to get ourselves outside of the dark place, because she had a terminal illness, and that's how we did it. That's how we found joy, was writing notes and having these conversations with old veterans and first responders. And it wasn't always easy, but it was just that simple act of doing something for someone else, serving, that pulled us out of that. And even today, when I'm having a hard day, it is helpful. And once you see those signs, when you start seeing the people in your community coming towards you, and you just can't unsee that. And so that's such a great reminder,
That's so good. Yeah. And that's, what I tell people is we've all been given a platform too, and that was your platform, right? And let's be honest, you also got to create the platform, if you will, hence a book, hence, having a Facebook page, whatever. But when you then use that platform like you did and like your mom did and stuff, that's so huge. It's such a thing. And that's what I love doing, and you guys are pretty much the first to hear this, not that it's hush hush, but we're going to be moving forward, most likely making their producers are going to turn my book into a movie, which to me is like, oh boy, the stress that's going to bring on our families is going to suck, because I don't like the limelight and stuff being out there and it all. But on a flip side is it's going to be a platform that we get to do something that's never really been done before from a Hollywood aspect of truly addressing a lot of this stuff here, and then using it to bless other people on a big scope. But again, let's be honest, a movie's just a movie. You and your mom giving notes, oh man, that would bless me a tenfold over watching a movie if I received that at the firehouse,
Well, it really came back to us. I mean, like, we didn't expect to get anything out of it.
Right.
It started to sort of feel selfish because it just felt so good. But that's how because
you're that's what I call being in the light. These
friendships and awesome people are giving back to you in your dark time, and it's a gift. And so it's hard for me to not know that that's possible when days get dark again.
Right. Well, the way I like to break it down for me in simplistic ways, because I'm just a simple man, is when we're in the light, it's where the fruit is, and the fruit tastes so good. It's where the sweetness is where that. When you're in the darkness, that's when you're in the bottom of the toilet, you're in the bottom of the outhouse and stuff. So when you're over there, it's not like you're doing it to make yourself feel better, but that's the fruits of the labor, the good stuff that comes back in return. And I just love hearing that.
I frame it in a way that the pastor of the very first church I ever attended framed it to me. You can never be thankful for all things, but you can learn to be thankful in all things.
That's good. That's really good, man. Thanks for sharing that, brother.
Well, Jason, this has been amazing. Welcome to our tribe. You are part of our family now, always.
Oh, thank you so much. So awesome to hang out.
Oh, it was so wonderful hearing your story and just getting to know you. Thank you for letting us get to know you.
Oh yeah. Thank you guys for in return sharing your stuff with me. And like I said, I'm going to make sure that you have my email address, because I'm horrible at using a computer while using all this other stuff and everything, and send it out to people. And one thing I do say is I respond to all emails and stuff. It's just, this is part of ministry to me. And if I Christian, non-Christian, like I always tell people, if I say something that touches someone, but then I'm not available to help back it up and point them to where they need to be, it was a flat failure on all levels. So I like to make myself available to the level which I can care, like I said, getting people where they need to be and stuff, and the right things and stuff. So you guys feel free to hit me up anytime and stuff if you have any questions.
That'll be great. And this recording will be on our YouTube channel. And so we can put your information too on that, so that people can contact you.
Cool.
Whatever you want on there.
Yeah,
so,
no, I got you. Yeah.
Thank you again.